Another very interesting game by Mikhail Tal. This time he is playing a under 20 tournament in Leningrad against Shlomo Giterman. And this was played in 1951. So, this point he is either 15 or turning 15, something like that. And we see um, Mikhail Tal play a d4 opening, which, you know, he could play apparently when he was young as well. And it's d4, c4, c6. We have a, what is this, the Slav defense, I think? Knight c3, knight f6, um, knight f3, obviously. And then g6, trying to transpose into the Grunfeld. E3, bishop g7, bishop g3, castles, castles, c5. The reason Tal mentions this in a book is that he's talking about endgames and playing bishop endgames, sort of first time wins and first time losses in long endgames. And here we get to see a beautiful endgame that was eventually blundered away by Shlomo Giterman, unnecessarily according to the engine, but it's very difficult, very difficult. Already here, I think Tal is better. He's got more space in the center. He's occupying more squares. His pieces have, scope and they can develop, and these pieces look sort of sad. This usually strong bishop is not really performing great yet, but that e5 pawn does look a bit weak. Here, a better move was to attack the e7 square, I believe, and then after something like this, you prevent nastiness from happening. And after the bishop attacks the knight, it is hard to say where that knight has got to go. If you move it back to either d7 or e6, I mean, that is the worst queenside in the history of chess. That bishop is not getting out to a decent square, and if the bishop doesn't get out, the rook doesn't get out, and if you put it on e6, you can develop the bishop maybe if you're lucky, but then the e-pawn is not a happy pawn, and that rook looks sad as well, so then you have to play bishops a6, and then you can decide whether or not you want to take that knight and just immediately destroy that pawn structure over this side, or if you want to play it with the bishop pair on the board, just claim that you're better. You attack the rook, and you can start working on this pawn again, because that rook, it has to move. Doesn't have a good square, so it goes back. And yeah, I mean, horrible position for black. So bishop g5, maybe a bit more testing than what happened in the game. Similar things happen in the game, but it's not as good. You take takes the pawn with check, king moves, takes the knight, huge sort of flurry of blows, and at the end of the line, nice calculation. You win a pawn by force, essentially, and white is just a pawn up, and yeah, better position for white. No compensation for black for the lost pawn. There's no tactics for black to basically claim that there has been something to work for. Um, Here you can take the pawn. I've dabbled with it a little bit, trying to see what would happen. Um, I mean, this is a game where you're just sad, and you're a pawn down, and I mean, you hardly have any initiative. And here, um, this doesn't seem like a good move at all. You blunder away the rook. Why have I included g3? That makes no sense. G3 is ridiculous. You have to move the rook. G3? It's idiotic. Okay. Anyway, that's not what happened. Bishop f5 was played, and then bishop d5 was played. And here the pawn is taken, and yeah. Rook e1 was played, and then this is a mistake, which wasn't punished, by the way. This was better, attacking, and then taking another pawn for free, and then exchanging the rooks. Mind you, in this position, yeah, obviously you can't take the bishop, because checkmate. This is, yeah, that's not a good line to fall into. You don't want this. You don't want this. So don't take the free poisonous bishop. Just exchange and claim that you're a pawn up, and these three are stronger than these two, and you're gonna win this game. That would have been better maybe, but instead of moving the rook back to b1 after this, Mikhail Tal took the pawn on b7 with the bishop, and then exchanged rooks in the other file. And now it's a similar situation where you have more pawns on this end of the board than your opponent. You're a pawn up, and you want to prove that you can win this game. The double bishops, that king, for the moment, cannot escape. I should do that in red, right? Cannot escape that strong bind that the bishops have. So in this situation, white is not only a clear pawn up, this pawn, but also it's a queen up, right? You just move the queen, king, I'm sorry. Move the king into a position where it has play, and you can round up some stuff. So obviously that is not allowed, and a similar idea by Giterman, who takes away the run square for the king. Here, Tal played g3, which makes sense because you want to get this king out somehow. a6, just, gaining a little bit of space and anchoring that bishop over there. King up, bishop here, bishop. It's hard to say why this is a good move. But some progress was made, I guess. Right, the pawns start to march. This is the plan. You move the king up the board, you move your pawns up the board, and you just say, your king is not participating. I'm taking the space that you're giving me. And, I mean, yeah, good position. Here, black is forced to break the bind and have that king play, but it's already kind of too late. And those pawns have gained so much space that, yeah, it's really difficult to do anything with black. But on the other hand, it's really difficult for white to win this. Here I am wondering, yeah, there's only one move for the king. You have to protect the pawn. I was wondering, but you can't. There are no weird tricks. King e5, and then you attack the pawn. But it's not a real attack. I mean, it's still covered by the bishop. So bishop moves to c4, attacking a2. a2 moves to a dark square and is now forever safe. Same thing happens with a5. Those light squared bishops cannot touch the pawn anymore. And we have reached the position that is critical. Now, I couldn't find the maneuver that Mikhail Tal is talking about. But Mikhail Tal says that the maneuver he thought of wins by force. Now, this is not true. I've analyzed it a little bit with Stockfish 14.1. It's not winning by force, but it is as a concept, it is very, very good, very well thought of. It is defendable by the computer, by the engine, because Shlomo Giterman cracks and makes a decisive mistake, which Tal punishes, but computer would have defended it better, and there was no win by force. But if you want to think of a plan for white, I suggest you stop the video here and just write down what is the right plan for white. How can white win this game? All right, assuming you've paused the video and looked at this position for a long time, because it is a complicated, difficult endgame. It is a theoretical draw, by the way, so it's very, very difficult to make progress. But the idea is that if this king can take that pawn, then white will win. Now, in the meantime, this king should not be allowed to take that pawn or that pawn, and this bishop is not allowed to do that either. So, we have to make sure that this bishop blocks out that bishop over these diagonals so that our king can take that pawn. Meanwhile, if this king enters here and takes that pawn, this pawn starts to roll. So this pawn is relatively safe from the king. It's not safe from the bishop. So at all cost, must you prevent that this bishop from either this square or that square takes the pawn. This bishop needs to block out that bishop, both on this diagonal and on the other two diagonals. If you manage to get a position where your king can move in this way or any other way, you can cross those diagonals and take this pawn, or this way, whatever, right? Maybe via the dark squares, and take that pawn, you win the game. That's the plan. Let's see how Mikhail Tal starts to work on it. The first move is king f3. Obviously, that blocks out any ideas from the bishop here. So the bishop has no other ideas than to go to f7. I mean, the check does absolutely nothing. King is still prevented from entering, bishop is still prevented from entering, so makes no difference. After bishop f7, we remaneuver the bishop to the long diagonal. Now this is maybe why in this position this move is better, because now at least this bishop does not take control over these 8 squares, right? This bishop is controlling the long diagonal now. Maybe that is better. I'm not sure. Anyway, black has no constructive moves to make, and so has to give the move away using the bishop. King e3. Now, phase 1 of the rerouting maneuver is complete. The king is going to try either via the dark squares. This one is not allowed, obviously, but perhaps at some, maybe if the king moves, you can do it, to get over to this pawn. That is the idea. And we've taken control of the long diagonal. This bishop is going to try and take control over these squares, right? Okay. No constructive moves to be made by white, so we give away the turn. There are no other ideas. Bishop f3. Because we don't want the bishop to ever do something like this, and we don't want the king to come in, so we can move it back. If the king ever tries anything, attacks anything, whatever. No constructive moves to be made. We have to give away the move. Okay, there we go. King lets go of the infiltration square by the black king, but it makes no difference. Bishop a2. Bishop e3. That was the plan. That was the plan always. Now we have to be a little bit careful, because if we are not careful, that bishop can gain control over this square. Maybe the king can come in and bishop takes or king takes and rounds up. He also has to be careful, so it's not an option right now, because this pawn is always quicker when the king is, behind the pawn. You can never catch it anymore. But it is just something to be wary of. Perhaps also, there could be checks. We have to do a little bit of calculation here. Anyway, bishop d1. Trying to keep this bishop out of that square still. Meanwhile, making room for the king, and then taking control of this diagonal. Because if the king can cross that diagonal, or here and then there, we can start rounding up that pawn, right? We have to make a move. There we go. King enters. We have to give away the square. Now, the king cannot cross anywhere, right? Those squares are taken. So, we want to exchange bishops. Now, let's say takes. King here is impossible. It is just impossible. So if you go here, you cannot take. There's absolutely no way you can take, right? So yeah, you have to forfeit this diagonal. You have to forfeit it. Okay, there's another diagonal. You're still not home. You still have to cross these squares as the pawn defends the dark square, so you can't get in, right? Bishop back. We have to be patient. In order to cross, the king has to be here, and this bishop has to be there. So we're going to reroute that bishop, block out this bishop, and then get our king to this square, and then eventually get the king here. That is the plan. Take control. Okay, we have to give away a square. Okay, give away turns, right? We have to be a little bit careful here. Let's say this move, then we get this, and we're very sorry for our choices, because now this pawn is very quick, and our bishop does not have control of that square. So we have to make a very correct, well-calculated move. We have to be very precise, and we play bishop e2, putting black to zugzwang. Now bishop here is prevented, and if we lose control over these squares, the king will enter, And if bishop keeps control over this diagonal, then we have time to put the bishop in, which is what happens. Okay. Now, Shlomo Giterman is pushed out of this diagonal. He cannot prevent the white king from entering here, but this square is also key. We can also prevent the white king from entering on a4. So, king b3, bishop c6, again threatening to enter, bishop b2 again, and here Giterman should do nothing. Here Giterman should just keep control over this diagonal and claim that the same trick with putting the bishop in front is not possible, because you can never get control over that. Maybe it is possible. Maybe you have to do something like this. For example, when you go back, you can go here, and then when you do this, you always have to protect this, yes? So, how to proceed? You have to give away, you have to put the guy in Zugzwang again. Maybe this. And obviously king can't enter because of this. Oh wait, there is a check. Yeah, this is unfortunate. Now you're losing the game. So maybe the king can enter? And now you do this, and you haven't exactly given away the square. So you have to give away the turn again. But now maybe this starts to rule, yes? Yeah, and then now things are awful. So king can, I don't think king entering is a good idea here. Yeah, just keep doing nothing. Keep doing nothing. Give this away. Keep giving away. Keep giving away squares. I mean, as long as this king is always kept out, you're always keeping a draw. But that doesn't happen. Shlomo Giterman is being pressured, and he cracks, and he plays the losing move a4. And now the king can enter via the dark squares, and now it is completely over. And resigns. So, very interesting little endgame maneuver there that the computer knows how to prevent. But the plan, to see the plan here in this position, to sort of, let's see, in this position, to see the plan that it's all about the control over these diagonals and being whether or not you're able to move that king up and take that pawn using Zugzwang tricks with this bishop, that is something that is amazing to me. I did find the sort of basic endgame skill of, you know, putting my king to a better square, and then I just have no idea. After this move, I agree to draws. Which, technically it is, but I wouldn't know that. And so, I mean, Mikhail Tal didn't know that either. And so he won. Very interesting game.